Harvard Divinity School.
Harvard Divinity School Diploma Awarding Ceremony, May 28th, 2026.
You may be seated. Dear graduates, guests, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends, welcome to the HDS Campus Green. How wonderful to have you all here with us for the Harvard Divinity School Diploma Awarding Ceremony. Congratulations, graduates. I would like to take a moment to say that today marks a major milestone for our graduates and for the families, friends, and loved ones who have offered their support to make this moment possible. We celebrate you today, and we honor all that you have accomplished here at HDS and through your work around the world. It is now my honor to introduce this year's graduate speaker, Rachel Florman. Rachel, thank you for sharing your remarks with us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you to my classmates for allowing me to stand up here today and address you all. It is an honor and a total delight to see my family, my friends, those of you with whom I matriculated nearly 3 years ago, some of you whom I only met in the past few months. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start with a reading from one of my personal sacred texts, from Judith Butler's book, Precarious Life. Yeah, thank you. So Butler writes, "Perhaps we make a mistake if we take the definitions of who we are legally to be adequate descriptions of what we are about. Although this language may well establish our legitimacy within a legal framework ensconced in liberal versions of human ontology, it does not do justice to passion and grief and rage, all of which tear us from ourselves, bind us to others, transport us, undo us, and implicate us in lives that are not our own." So academic jargon aside, what I think Butler means is that each of us is so much more than our basic descriptors, the answers to the types of questions we might have asked one another at orientation 3 years ago. We are shapeshifters. We are affected by our experiences of the world and by the people around us. And by virtue of our time here together, to use Butler's language, we have become implicated in each other's lives. I think this is what it means to be in community. Not just that we're all classmates, although I guess that is the technical definition of who we are, but that we are allies, partners in crime, thought partners, friends. We make each other stronger through our comments in class and our feedback on each other's writing. We facilitate ritual for one another and pray in each other's native tongues. We come to know ourselves better through the eyes of one another, deepening personal relationships while strengthening communal ties. And standing here, looking at all of you, I am in awe of the community we've become. A classmate recently offered me a new understanding of who I am in this community. He said, "You're sort of the ideal HDS commencement speaker, a Jewish girl who can give a sermon about the Gospel of John." But seriously, more than just that one sermon, I think I've done it all here. I started as an MTS, I followed the well-worn path to graduating as an MDiv, and I even got my RPL certificate along the way. I got my hands dirty in the HDS garden once or twice, I sang with the choir at noon service, and I sent slightly unhinged messages in the all-students group chat. I cried to Katie in OSL, I cried to Carrie in RSL, I cried on the phone in the labyrinth back there. I cried from frustration in the library. I cried during a sound bath in the chapel. And I cried in the hallway outside the cater room after angrily storming out of my Intro to Ministry Studies class one morning last fall. And I share all of this not to brag about the fact that I'm a water sign or complain about the fact that HDS has made me more in touch with my emotions than perhaps I would like, but to name how incredible, how devastating, and how hard these past 3 years have been. Because to state what might be obvious, Harvard was not made for us, for me, or for most of you who sit in front of me today. How many people in our graduating class are cis white men going on to become Protestant ministers? And all respect to you guys. I mean, there are parts of my identity that this institution abides. And I'm a Jewish person at a historically Christian institution. And I'm a Jewish person whose opinions, beliefs, and actions don't always fit the narrow expectations laid out for me by establishment organizations, national media, any number of lawsuits, or the current presidential administration. And this positionality recalls a sort of intellectual ancestor, Professor Judah Monis. Rabbi Monis, as is written on his tombstone, was the first Hebrew language instructor at Harvard College, hired back in 1722. Hebrew was a required course for all students back then, since all educated Christian men were expected to be able to read the Bible in its original language. And so it follows that all faculty were required to be professing Christians. So Judah Monis converted publicly in Harvard Yard 1 month before assuming his post as professor. Historians don't know whether Monis continued to practice some form of Judaism or whether he reverted to Jewish practice at any point in his life. He married a Christian woman and he joined her church, but he remained a tokenized object of both fascination and suspicion throughout his tenure at Harvard. He represented a Christian ideal, both as someone with deep, privileged knowledge of Jewish scripture and someone who seemed to have accepted Christianity into his life. But again, the flip side to that fascination is suspicion or scrutiny. I get it. There are many of us here today who know what it feels like to be tokenized by the very people and institutions that claim to support us or desire our participation. To play a character of ourselves in an attempt to match social and cultural expectations. The form of tolerance for the other that emerges through tokenization isn't true acceptance, and it doesn't make for meaningful relationships. It's conditional, and it lacks trust. It also erases the possibility of self-definition, of the chance to determine, let alone claim, what we're about. So 200 years after Rabbi Monis converted, Harvard Divinity School professor and Presbyterian minister George Foot Moore published an essay titled Christian Writers on Judaism, 19 Centuries of Polemics and Apologetics. In it, he harshly criticizes Old Testament scholars who try to prove the doctrines of Christianity through Jewish theology. And he ultimately condemns the whole field for what he sees as its anti-Jewish bias. Ironically, Professor Moore was also a Christian writer on Judaism. He worked very hard to understand Judaism in its own context. He was actually awarded honorary degrees from 2 different rabbinical schools in the 1920s. And yet he never situated himself with nuance in the lineage of thinkers he described. He never seemed to have reconciled his identity with his scholarly pursuits. Professor Janet Giazzo, in her 2003 convocation address to the Divinity School, asked what I think is a relevant question on this topic. And by the way, she opened that address by situating herself beautifully. Not only, as she says, an American woman scholar of Buddhism who was raised Jewish in Philadelphia, but, and again, I quote, someone with years of friendships with and indebtedness to Tibetan Buddhist masters, with a cocksure, sarcastic skepticism about most everything. This is the type of self-definition I'm talking about. The type that acknowledges a border-blurring, boundary-crossing relational self. And in this address, Professor Ghiazzo asks outright, she says, how can one study a religion's history objectively if one's sympathies lie with its fortunes and truths? This is a question that Moore seems to answer in his essay about Christian writers on Judaism. He very compellingly makes the case that one can't, especially not those scholars he criticizes invested in what Judaism's history meant for Christianity's present. But Moore himself is a bit more interesting. Simultaneously removed from and entangled with the world he studied, his perspective might be a form of Christian supremacy masquerading as objectivity, but that judgment's complicated by his rigorous engagement with and attention to contemporary Jewish communities. He complicates our understanding of who studies whom and why. So 105 years after Moore published his essay, 304 years after Monis's public baptism, I stand before you today. And all of us are here today, despite Harvard's history of coerced conversions, Harvard's legacy of slavery, the Harvard Indian College, and the many other stains on the university's history that might have prohibited our ancestors from ever thriving here. We are celebrating today. And trying to prepare for this speech, I went back through my notes app, hoping for scraps of inspiration from my time here. And apparently, in my first ever meeting with my academic advisor, Professor Ann Browdy, I wrote down this nugget of wisdom. She said, "Our students do things for which there is no guide. That's what we're trying to prepare you for, to create solutions to problems that people haven't explored yet." So 3 years later, I can confirm that she was right. It's become clear to me that we are not just here to study one defined topic or another, to become narrower, neater versions of ourselves. The point of graduating from Harvard Divinity School isn't to say that we graduated from Harvard Divinity School. As we've learned over the past few years, even the most elite institutions cannot and will not protect us from any number of threats, from doxing progressive activists to financial precarity via budget cuts or low wages to rising autocracy nationwide. The point is to get our hands dirty in the garden. The point is to cry at the sound bath, to feel alive listening to the Baptist preacher, and be inspired by the practitioners that we are lucky enough to learn from. The point is to take what we did here and bring it into the world with us as we attempt to do those things for which there is no guide. I used the word awe earlier, and I meant it. I am in awe of all of you. Awe like admiration, like respect, like reverence. We, as individuals in a community with our professors and the HDS staff, have shown up for each other when the university did not or could not. I see people here today who fundraised for victims of Hurricane Helene last fall. I see people who showed up on the picket lines with grad workers striking for better labor conditions. I see people who joined the custodians rallying for fair pay this fall. I see people here who demonstrated true interfaith friendship in the Solidarity Encampment 2 years ago. And I see people who work to understand each other across difference in the Black Jewish Pluralism Project this year. I see the international students who fight for your beloved home countries despite constant threat of persecution. And I see those of you who sent prayers over WhatsApp when a classmate's mother was dying. I see people who were brave, who were tired, and who showed up anyway. So we can graduate and choose to never look back. But we won't be able to undo the effects we've had on each other's lives. Whether or not we want to be, we're implicated. No legal definition or institutional norm can change that. So we'll continue to shapeshift, to define and redefine ourselves and one another as we go on to live as the chaplains, teachers, ministers, activists, writers, artists, musicians, lawyers, scholars, and changemakers will be or have already become. We will continue to be good friends. We will continue to refuse categorization, and we will continue to make our ancestors proud. I don't have any particular words of wisdom to close with, only an affirmation. We have what we need. We are what we need. Congratulations to the graduating class. We did it.
Sponsored by Office of Student Life at Harvard Divinity School.
Copyright 2026, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.